Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline podcast. My name is Shayna Terrell. I am the Director of Pipeline Programming at the Center for Black Educator Development. Hailing from the South Bronx that raised me and been out in these Philadelphia streets that made me. So always made a shout out. Today, I would like to give a special shout out to all the teachers around the world. I know some of you have already been back at work and in the fine grind. A lot of our teacher friends are going back to work today, stepping foot in the building. And I just want to send y'all all light and love and let you know to be encouraged. I know with this past year and everything that has went on and happened with the pandemic and all that craziness, I know that sometimes it gets hard, but know that our children need you, our families need you, our communities need you. And thank you so much for the work that we do. And shout out to any parents and families out there watching. That spirit of community and unity that you held on to during the pandemic, please continue that, because our teachers need to feel supported. They need to feel loved. And most of all, they need to be encouraged. So thank you. And Citizens Ed and the Center for Black Educator Development, a major thank you for creating this platform where we can talk to real people in a real struggle doing the real work. So today's theme, Black male voices building a Black educator pipeline. The topic, we need Black male educators. So I'd like to introduce my today's guest. Super excited about him coming on today. So Curtis Valentine is co-director of the Progressive Policy Institute Reinventing America's School Project. Curtis also serves as adjunct professor at the University of Maryland College Park and as at-large member of the Prince George County, Maryland Board of Education. A graduate of Morehouse College and the Harvard Kennedy School, Curtis is the co-founder and CEO of Real Men Teach, a national campaign to recruit and retain educators, male educators of color. So please welcome on with me, Curtis Valentine. Curtis, welcome, brother.
Hello. Peace. How you doing?
Doing good. We are excited to have you on with us today, rocking your Real Men Teach gear. We love to see it. Love to see it. Let the people know where they
always
can
on
get.
brand.
You got to be on brand. Let the people know where they can get a little apparel at. Where can they go get
Well,
that?
it's super simple. realmenteach.com. It will take you to our print to order service. You can pick different colors. We have other hoodies and T-shirts that highlight male educators in popular culture, like Professor Dwayne Wayne and Furious Styles from Boys in the Hood.
Yes.
And so get your apparel today.
Shout out to you, rocking it well. So always we like to start off with hearing a little bit about our guests and their journey to be an educator. Can you share with us today what led you into the space of education? What inspired you to be an educator?
Well, for me, I'll say, and this is a recent discovery, that I didn't choose education. Education chose me. I come from a long history of men and women in education, going back to a man named John Chavis, who in the early 1800s became the first African American in U.S. history to go to college in this country. He eventually started a school in North Carolina that educated both Black and white students. And I am part of that history. I'm also part of the history of my great grandparents, Beverly and Martha Valentine, who started a Rosenwald school in Bracy, Virginia, that educated future scientists and future lawyers and future doctors, and was part of a national campaign by Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald to create over 5,000 schools throughout the South. I'm also a part of the history of William Valentine, who was the headmaster of something called the Bordentown School in Bordentown, New Jersey, which was the only all-Black public boarding school in the North, which was eventually shut down when Brown versus Board of Education was brought in. And so I come to this space as an educator, someone who was touched by male educators and growing up in public school system in Somerset, New Jersey. When I finished at Morehouse, I eventually went off to South Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer and became an educator working in villages in post-apartheid South Africa, returned to the U.S., and became a school teacher right here in Prince George's County, Maryland, where I'm on the school board. But this idea of really wanting to be an educator comes from those who poured into me and me just wanting to pass that forward. And as I teach, at the University of Maryland College Park and really push Real Men Teach, this is me giving back to those who've given so much to me.
I mean, that's a dope story because you come from a legacy of Black educators. And a lot of times in our programs, that's what we're teaching, the legacy of Black education. And this is a long history and a long tradition of Black folks teaching our own and being educators in the community. So that is amazing that you can attach and trace your lineage back to a long history of Black educators. And then you kind of peruse past this part, but I think it's dope that you are an international educator. Okay. You went back out there and you was teaching in the motherland. So even to get back connected um, to Africa and then come back to America in a sense that international education. Did you see a large difference between American education and education on the motherland?
There were similarities and differences. Particularly, I think people are people wherever you go. Parents care about their children wherever you go.
Mm-hmm.
But in some cases, particularly on the continent, education as a means to individual progress was particularly coming out of apartheid was not institutionalized. You come back to the United States, obviously, there are opportunities here to move throughout the ecosystems through education, but
Mm-hmm.
to a lesser degree that we think that particularly those of other races in America have. And so the racial divide in South Africa and the racial divide in America were quite similar. And so white South African students had a much different trajectory through the system than Black South African students, as it is here in the U.S. But just the system of parental engagement, system of Black educators really being at the forefront of the work is one of part of my vision for Real Men Teach and what education looks like in America, which is people of color, people really having control over their own destiny as it relates to educating their children.
Dope. Amazing. Sad that even across the land, across the world, race is still the major divider in who gets a quality education. That's super
Mm-hmm.
sad. But talk to us about Real Men Teach. What is Real Men Teach? What's the goal of the organization?
Well, Real Men Teach unofficially launched on December 1st of 2020. And our story is we launched in the pandemic.
Ah,
But, as the old saying goes, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And, like my man Malcolm Gladwell says, take that 10,000 hours to really get good at something. And so technically, Real Men Teach started roughly 8 years ago. And this idea of the Male Educator Network of Prince George's County, which was a program that I started as a school board member. When I joined the school board, being an educator at the time, I was the only person on the school board who actually taught in my school system. And
wow.
I've been on the school board for 8 years, and I'm still the only person on the school board who actually has taught in the school system in which I'm on the school board. And so I understood the impact that black male educators have had on students, but also the power of community and support and the impact that could have on particularly retention of Black male educators. And so I partnered with Albert Lewis, who was the reigning teacher of the year in the county, a young African American teacher. When I met him, he said, "I'm a teacher of the year." I said, "Man, you in your mid late 20s, and you're the teacher of the year." I said, "Man, we should work together on trying to create more Albert Lewises."
Right.
And so partnered with him and then my brother Victorious Hall, who was also an educator. And so the three of us, along with other men throughout the district, said, "Let's form a forum, an opportunity for us to come together, train one another in the skills we need to be successful, sort of in our positions, but also as we move up and through the career paths." And so for roughly 7 years, we work to really support men of color in education here in Prince George's County, to the point where right now our school district has the largest percentage of male educators and male educators of color in the entire DC metro area. And so this idea of what could happen in a district really gave me the idea for what could happen nationally. And so Real Men Teach is that campaign to really highlight the success of what it looks like to be a Black male educator, how we reinvest, how we reimagine, all with the intention and goal to recruit and retain more male educators of color.
So you said so much right there. But one of the things that I found really interesting in what you said was that you are the only person on that school board who has taught in that school district. And I just find that amazing because you have people making decisions for a community or a school that they haven't, had years of investment in. So again, shout out to you for wanting to again move up that ladder and invest in a community that you are a part of. We need more people doing things like that so we can have control and decision making power and have seats at the table. So shout out to you. So it sounds like Real Men Teach like really took off. So it exploded, which shows us that there was a gap and there was a need, and real men were making the decision to stand in it and fill that gap. Can you break down for us what you guys mean by real men? I think that phrase is so like just used in community, right? Like you gotta be a real man. Real men do this. I'm a real man. Okay, what is that, right? What is the concept of real men teach?
No, I appreciate that. And again, I think for those who have purchased our apparel, who shared our information, who sort of really pushed us out, for many people, the success of Real Men Teach is in some way the simplicity of the term, but also how loaded each term really is and how much of a discussion topic each term really is. And in many ways, how we are really trying to give back the power to individuals to define in their own terms what each word means. And so when we talk about the term real, we're really in this space of authenticity and allowing people to be their authentic self in spaces, but also the power and impact that could have on them as educators. Those who can walk into a teaching space, bring their knowledge of a particular content area or skill, but bring everything along with it and not just solely that skill or content area. And what the impact that would have on, particularly on their students and their permission and that you give your students to be their authentic selves at the same time. And so it's very much a win-win. And so when we say real, we say, you know what? Real is what real means to you. And as we talk about people defining what it means to be authentic in this space, whether you have to be sort of, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what its sexual orientation is, what its gender is, what do you identify with, what your background is, whether you have a degree or not, however you look, whatever real means to you is what you define. And so when you support our gear, and this is for men, women and men who support our work, authenticity and realness is defined by, and you could shape it and not be really constricted by what real has meant in the past. And we often, talk about real, but not also the word men. And the word men, again, we're having a conversation around gender identity, and also just what it means to be a man. And oftentimes we talk to men, we say, how do you define manhood? And oftentimes that definition is based on what their father's definition of manhood is, or their grandfathers, or their great grandfathers, depending on the influence they had on their lives. But we say, we moving forward, we define what manhood means. Does manhood mean being you have to do something that may be a negative seen by some? Does it mean that you're doing things that give you a certain cachet in a certain community? But we say, with particular, you define what men means, particularly in a profession like teaching that has been femininized as far as this idea of like only women teach. Like, no, this is not something that is solely for women. We're saying that manhood and being a teacher and an educator are synonymous. And lastly, the term teach. This idea that, when we think about all those who influence our children on a daily basis, not only their instructors, but everyone who touches them from the moment they open their eyes in the morning, from their father, from their grandfather, when they leave the house, that school bus driver, when they get off the bus, whether it be the security guard or the person who is the building supervisor, to the paraprofessional, to the person working in the lunchroom, to the football coach after school, to the chess coach. All of those men in every capacity is a teacher. There's a picture that went viral a couple of years ago of a student who was sitting out in the hallway at a desk working on an assignment. And there happened to be a security guard sitting at the desk with the student doing his homework. It's this idea that the security guard was walking by, saw the student in the hallway, and we can have a conversation about discipline and why the student was put out. But nevertheless, the security guard said, "Hey, what are you working on? I understand how to do that. Can I help you with that?" Because he said, like we say, is it's all hands on deck. And so every man that we see that touches a child is a teacher in that space. And so those who wear our apparel make a statement that you don't have to be a classroom teacher. But if you're a father and you taught your child how to tie their shoes or ride their bike or how to tie a tie, in that space, you were a teacher. You were a bus driver and you were the first person in the morning that told that student, you are amazing, you're great. What you learned in school that day, and you're imparting some knowledge onto them. In that space, you are their teacher. If you're a security guard or the building supervisor, in every space you have to impart onto our young people, we are creating a village approach. And so Real Men teaches authenticity. It's defining who we are, but expanding this role of what it means to be a teacher in a time when we need all hands on deck.
That's dope. And the reason why I like that concept and how it's just multi-layered, I think it just sends a message beyond classroom teacher, but it's also very encouraging about what teaching means and what it means to be a teacher beyond book knowledge, right? Beyond all of those things. And I think that is great. Number one, telling people the whole real men, that really means you bringing your authentic self and who you are. And how you define manhood. I think that that's amazing because I think a lot of times under the concept of real man, people don't get to be their authentic selves, especially when we think about our young boys and what's pushed into their heads about manhood. A lot of them shy away from being their authentic selves in an attempt to fit onto a role or somebody else's idea of what a real man is. And we know those have so many negative consequences and effects on the psyche of our young men and then how they then act that out. So the concept of being a real man and being your authentic self, I think is dope on the levels that you connected that on. And then
let me add one more thing. I think when it comes to those who coming up, right, these Gen Z students who I think are redefining it really on their own.
Yes.
And it's a quick example. So within our apparel, we have pink hoodies. And when I came up, I think I give shout out to Killer Cameron and Dipset for
Killer Cam,
yeah, making pink, manly. But before that, growing up, mothers, fathers didn't put pink on their sons. Mm-hmm. That's not manly, right? We don't do that. Even purple in some ways, But these young people right now are saying, hold on, there are no boundaries to how I present myself, to what I wear, to who I am. And so if you want me to go into this teaching, you're trying to recruit me to become a teacher, but you're saying I have to still live by these antiquated views of what it means to what I could wear, what I could dress, how I could present myself into the space. Well, I don't want to be there unless you can really appreciate me for who I am in 2021, but it's someone who wears pink, who wears jewelry, has earrings in my ear, have natural hair, all those things that I think a lot of us, when we came up, really had to tuck in and sort of, even unconsciously say, you know what, I'm going to respond to those things that people say are manly. Some of, many of them were not so positive. Right now, we want to introduce our young people into teaching. We have to create those spaces that meet them where they are and what their definitions of authenticity and manhood are.
And you're opening up something that's so important that we talk about a lot on building a Black educator pipeline, breaking down those barriers. Why do we create barriers for Black people to be in the education field, right? If they're dealing with enough financial barriers, all types of stuff. And then for us to come in and create these unconscious or these invisible barriers that keep folks, especially young people, out of the profession, it's so important to begin breaking those walls down. A lot of times I talk to people about the young people are the foundation of the pipeline. There will be nobody to recruit, teach, retain, or any of that stuff if we don't begin to start investing in our young people inside the pipeline. So again, having these conversations, creating campaigns that break down those barriers for our young people to feel welcome in this space, I think is dope. I think it's super amazing. So appreciate that. Now, your organization talks a lot about recruitment and retention of Black males, but I think what's dope and I don't hear a lot is this idea of reimagining and reinvesting. I think that doesn't get talked about enough, and all four of those concepts aren't put together as like a strategic strategy. So can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by reimagining and reinvesting in the pipeline or in Black male educators?
No, I think, as I mentioned before, this idea of what society, what institutions believe it means to be a Black and Latino male educator has to be challenged. When I became a school teacher, like a lot of Black and brown men who become school teachers, everything that everyone thought a Black and brown teacher should be was downloaded onto me or downloaded onto my brothers. Disciplinarian, someone who's going to, we're going to send all the problem children to them. Was like probably one of the few in the building, black or brown men in the building. And so all those things get downloaded onto you, even if you're not in the right position to address those things. And so it's incumbent upon everyone to say, all right, can we just throw out that old view of what it means to be a Black and brown male teacher and move forward with this new reimagination of what it looks like, but more importantly, that is defined by Black and brown male educators, that we define what it means to be, from 2020 moving forward, what that looks like. Because in many cases, the retention issues that we have is, burnout. A brother saying, you know what, they came in and I wanted to do this and they had me doing this. But where does that come from? Where does that view of what it means to be a Black and brown educator come from? It comes from history. It comes from a lack of imagination. It comes from stereotypes. And so this reimagining, and particularly our Real Men Teach 100 campaign, which is saying we are going to use images of Black and brown men and allies from, our white brothers who are allies in their natural state, and saying, here's what it looks like. I'm defining it in my natural habitat to say, here are the images. And we understand the power of imagery going back to, pre-emancipation, where people used imagery through photographs and eventually through videos and audios to shape views and stereotypes of particularly Black and brown men in society. Those stereotypes carry through even into the education field and into teaching. And we're saying through our platforms and through the voices we have, we can redefine and shape that and reimagine the future of what it means to be a Black and brown male educator. What does one look like? What does one talk like? What subjects do they teach? We have a shortage of particularly Black and brown educators in the lower elementary classrooms, because there was this sense that, even some parents who had, someone who looked like me teaching kindergarten would push back. Why is he teaching kindergarten? Why is he teaching the little kids? Those things impact us. And if we're saying that we're going to just carry these old ways of stereotyping us, that we're going to get the same result. And so this reimagining, which is again allowing us to speak out through our images and to define what it looks like, is an incredibly important way to retain those who we bring in. Because if not, I think we're going to lose more than we bring in.
I agree with you 100%. The typecasting of Black male teachers has to stop. And one thing I learned from being around more Black male educators is they want to be recognized for what they do. And that's way more than discipline. Just because they can connect with students on a cultural level, or students can relate to them. Black male educators can teach. They're quality educators. They can be your administrators. They can be your principals. They can be your grade team leads. They can be your curriculum writers, all of those things. But we definitely need to reimagine a world where Black men are leading and teaching. I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of times, and I've been, acquainted with Black men who have left organizations because they feel like they are being so typecast into a certain role. They're trying to move into roles of, instruction, and folks are trying to tell them, oh, you'll be better suited here. And exactly what you said about Black men being in the high school arena. And, there's a deeper thought process and connection for that, because they want them there as a sense of control for Black boys, so to speak, right? Because we all know that the population for teaching is heavily populated with white women. So they want them there, dare I say, as a scare tactic or a token piece. Who these Black boys need somebody to relate to, they do. But young children also need to see positive images of Black men. Young children also need to develop positive classroom relationships with Black men. Again, we plant seeds in kids' heads from the time they're born. So imagine kindergartners and first graders having these positive relationships and seeing Black male teachers. That's the age where what most kids are talking about. I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a policeman, right? All those great things. So imagine your teacher, a Black male teacher. I want to be like Mr. Valentine. Like, I want to be him. So all of those things are being.
But I think I mean to cut you off, but
Yep.
I asked those to do an experiment, right? Sit down with some high school students and say, close your eyes and imagine a male teacher. Like, what does that person look like? When you and I came up, it was not someone who had any swag, right? had no coolness.
Glasses with the button up.
Okay. Nobody I wanted to be with. Didn't listen to your music. Didn't identify with you. Wasn't from your community, or so we thought. You never know. That person could have been from your very community, but the signals they were getting was you can't bring your Bronxness into this classroom. Like, you can't bring your Gun Hillness into here. And you're like, hold up, but I'm from the community. I know that, but you can't dress like this in class because this is not how Black male teachers dress. Yes. And what you're doing is creating these barriers, because the very thing those students were looking for was who you were in your authentic self. And this is not sort of like we have to really change who you are. I say just present who you are, how you are to your students. Because in the end, it's really about the students. And we talk about, this idea of my good brother, Chris Emden, just published a book called, Ratchetdemic, this idea of what it means to be ratchet. But at the same time, our young people in our communities, how we see them and what we define as, our growing skill that they had to have to adapt to the community in which they lived in. And so whether it be how you and we talk with our hands, like I talk with my hands. And if you told me, Curtis, put your hands in your pockets and do this whole interview, we would have a problem, right? but that, because where I'm from in New Jersey, people did this. And I'm kind of talking to emphasize, but also to kind of like, create a space for me to tell my story, especially when we do like 5 people trying to talk at the same time. And guess what? I also learned to talk fast because I had to get my piece in before Shayna got her piece in. And so, Curtis, why you talk so fast? Well, I'm a product of my environment of growing up. Now, if you're from Georgia or Alabama, maybe you talk slower. No better or worse. But when we don't bring ourselves to this space, we're not giving students the opportunity to bring themselves. And in many ways, we're not giving opening avenues for them to say, wow, my authentic self can also be presented in a way that I'm the educator. I'm at the front of the room. I'm leading the way. Because if you never see anyone who looks like you in leadership, you're unconsciously signaling that who you are is not worthy of leadership or of elevation. And so through our Real Men Teach 100 campaign is we put our people in the forefront and their authentic selves, saying, you know what, we are who we celebrate, and we celebrate us in our authentic spaces, reimagining what it means to be an educator so that those who come behind us feel like they are accepted in those spaces.
Yes. And I'm laughing in my mind because when you said, like, when you imagine a Black male teacher, what would they look like, right? I think about some of my experiences with young Black male teachers on dress down day. And how amazed the kids are when these brothers come in, right, with their true swag. Like, yo, dog, you wearing Timbs? Yeah, they real people. They real people.
Why not every day though? Why not? So this idea, like, so we have educators who on the weekends, they're sneakerheads, so they wear they got every pair of Jordans. They like comic books, so they go to Comic-Con and they're, or they play in a go-go band, or they freestyle. Those, but and so they're saying, you know what? I'm not going to bring it into the classroom because that's my personal life, and that's not what teachers do. And in your classroom, the very thing that student you're trying to get through to could have also an interest in comic books, in Jordans, in music, in visual arts, and what you're doing is tucking in all that. Mm-hmm. And you're at the same time creating a barrier for you to connect with those very students who are waiting and are looking for permission to be themselves. And you are right there, and God put you all together. And yet the systems, and in many ways, other educators, what it could be some white women, some Black women who are telling us, no, this is not how we do this here. And that's based on everything in the past. And saying, well, no, can we rethink this? Can we reimagine this for the betterment of the children and for the retention of the male educator?
Yes. And I haven't read that book. Was it Ratchenomics? But
Ratchetdemic.
Ratchetdemics.
Yeah, so like ratchet academics, this idea of, us being our authentic selves before our children, because Chris talks about how in the classroom the students will respond to math in a certain way, but during recess he'd look outside and he'd see them freestyling. And in the freestyle circle, they were like exuberant, they were all excited. He's like, well, how come I can get that excitement from the recess and the excitement of the freestyling into my classroom? Well, I have to meet my students where they are, not reject their authentic selves, which is, again, a product of their environment, and also understand that if it's really about the students, I need to meet them where they are, and who I bring into the classroom has an impact on who they bring to the classroom as well.
And I think sometimes with students, well, not sometimes, all the time, if you know students, if you work with students, especially Black students, students love when you bring your authentic and your true self to the classroom, no matter who you are, and they respond to that. So I'm even thinking about, just for Black men, the power of being your authentic self, the power of speaking your authentic language, right, at times to kids. So you teaching math, what is this? Throw a little like, all right, boom. So this is what we're going to do, right? Kids are going to respond to that because that's their language, that's their group, that's what they're attracted to. And that's like, Mr. Sosa, he mad cool, right? Like that's when you get that. But this idea that you can't be ratchet and academic, it's just unheard of. That's like almost telling kids like you can't outside of school, like we're straight laced and we don't party. We do, like we're real human, authentic people that children can actually relate to. You know what I mean? And understand.
But why would I want to be like you if you're all stuffy and like
that ain't the life I'm trying to live?
You're saying, don't you want to be a teacher too? Like you? Nah.
Like, I'm good.
Or what I think and what you all are doing, what the center is doing is we tell people, educators, particularly those who are trying to meet, as early as you all are, is, what? Nah, you could be a teacher in the way you want to be. We throw out all that and you bring who you want to be. And this is important because, what I've done with my work, University of Maryland, my students, we were virtual for a long time. And I would intro, my students were coming in and I'm playing DMX, I'm playing Talib, I'm playing, and they're coming in, they're like, where my dogs at? Oh my God. And I'm coming in, yes, how you doing, Curtis Valentine, Professor Valentine, and then we're going to talk about it. They were like, but I'm still with the business.
Yes.
But I'm going to tell you, if y'all were not here and in my office, I'm listening to DMX. I'm listening to Mobb Deep. I'm listening to Fela Kuti. I'm listening to the different people, but you gonna get this. And my man Loaded Luck said, you gonna get this work. And I listen to battle rap. Like I can listen to battle rap, but also turn on C-SPAN, right? I could listen to NPR radio and listen to Versus. That's who I am in my totality.
Yes.
But if we're saying as an educator, we only want this piece of you.
We only want the NPR and not the Versus. It's very problematic. Very problematic to, again, when you think about culturally who we are as a people, we're not monolithic, but we're not even monolithic in a solo sense. Like it's so many different avenues that we span from. And it is oppressive, and it is not inviting when you can't bring your authentic self and all of who you are to a space. And it's funny, right? It's like this sense of, oh, if I let you bring a little bit of the outside, you're not going to know how to be appropriate with it, right? Like just a smack in the face to grown people who are here living and working. But we can't show children how to do both, right? Like we don't have that power to show children how to do both.
But Shannon, so this is, I don't want to get off topic, but our Black church,
we always on topic.
but I would say the Black church has a similar issue. Mm-hmm. This idea that we want to keep the world outside of the church, because if the world comes into the church, that the church will become the world. Mm-hmm. But it's literally the opposite. You have to meet the world where it is, because this idea of, again, this judgment and this rejection of authenticity is the one, again, Real Men Teach says, I redeclare it. This is mine and I control it. And you go and the students are going to see it and they're going to say, you know what? I want that power. I want that power. I'm down for that. I'm willing to jump in with y'all. Let's do it.
Yes. So one of the things that you're doing with Real Men Teach, very similar to what we're doing at the center, is building a network of people, building institutions to fight institutions who are creating these concepts of how we act or what we should be. So like even the example of the church, there's a concept of created of how you should be a Christian or how you should be whoever in the church. Then you think about like who created this, right? Like who created these boundaries, who created these barriers? And then when you get like really deep rooted in it, right? A lot of this is rooted in white supremacies and power and control, right? People want to control and always police black people, black bodies, those kind of things. So when you start to reject those notions and understand, like I can be a professional, I can be what I want to be and still be my authentic self and still be appropriate. Like you find a lot of power in that. And I think what you're doing with Recruitment Teaching, what we're doing at the center is building institutions that celebrate that break down those barriers and allow people to be exactly who they are and respond, right? Culturally responsive, right? Respond culturally to people. And I think that's great work. But something that's really unique about you, right? So in addition to Real Men Teach, you also work at the Progressive Policy Institute for Reinventing American Schools. You're a professor at the University of Maryland. How do all three of those experiences influence your quest for teacher diversity?
Well, it's based on systems. And so at Reinvent America Schools, our goal is to work at the system level through superintendents and school board members to really look at how school systems are governed. And we really stand on sort of three pillars. One is this idea of autonomy, which is how do you give school leaders more power to make decisions over hiring and targeting particular underrepresented groups. And so in many cases, our really quest to really grow the level of autonomy that school leaders have. In many cases, those school leaders are going to have a little more autonomy, particularly in a charter school or in some cases called an innovation school. These are schools that you'll see in places like Camden, New Jersey. You'll see in places like Indianapolis and Denver, where you're saying we're going to give the school leader more autonomy to make hiring decisions. And so that's going to lead to more power and autonomy to choose and target particularly male educators of color. And so I think, that push, and we've worked in, 15, 20 different districts around the country, and I'm working with different school leaders and fellow school board members from around the country. That is incredibly important for me to talk to my colleagues who are also on school boards, talk about their policies around recruitment and retention, to tell about what we're doing in Prince George's County, targeting even now more Latinx brothers into teaching. At the same time, at the University of Maryland, I'm one of the few Black male professors that my students have ever had. And I'm coming to that space again, understanding the power and the influence I have, not only on Black students, but also on white students, that they understand and they could graduate from college saying, I too had a Black male professor, and his name was Professor Valentine, and this is who he was. Both masters from Harvard, everything else, but came to class in his authentic self. And so we're going to give permission to even some of our white brothers and sisters to be themselves, because they also live in a space where they have to sort of respond to certain caricatures of what it means to be who they are. I'm also on the faculty senate subcommittee on diversity, equity, inclusion at the University of Maryland. We have a Black male president for the first time in the school's history who's going to dedicate $40 million to teacher diversity at the higher ed level. And everyone teach, we want to partner with higher ed folks in this space. How are we working with higher ed to create pipelines of Black and brown male educators, not only in K-12, but also in higher ed as well? Because when we're talking about the teacher training that Sharif talks a lot about in your center, a lot of it's going to be who are teaching our young people how to be educators. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen with our professors.
Yep. And that's what my next question. I mean, you kind of answered it, but I would love to hear more about how it works in School of Education, because there's a lot of focus in K-12 education on teacher diversity, but there is a strong lack of teacher diversity in schools of education around the world. But why is it important that we do focus on diversity in schools of education? You already named one really important point, because it's important for us to understand who is teaching our future teachers. But what are some other benefits you see by diversifying schools of education around the country?
Well, I mean, I think when in some of the universities that have approached us, and we've been in such a place where we've had universities unsolicitedly just say, hey, we're trying to bring more high school students to apply to our university, particularly our School of Education. We have students who are on campus who are studying other topics, engineering, math, law, and we're trying to get them to take courses at our ed school because maybe they want to take their skill in science and math or in literature and apply it to teaching. And so they understand the power of what we call community. When you're in a classroom and you have someone who looks like you in a community others who look like you, likely that you're going to stay in that profession and want to, continue to study that major is increased. At the same time, when you come into a classroom and you see someone who looks like me and some of my colleagues in front of the classroom, you're going to say, okay, this is something I can get down. And you look on the syllabus and you see Ta-Nehisi Coates and James Baldwin and others. Like, oh, now I'm seeing myself even in the readings because prior to that, I was not. And then when it comes specifically to the teaching profession, this idea of cultural competency, this idea of ensuring that, we are teaching how to be anti-racist even before they get into the classroom, because oftentimes we sort of say, you know what, we'll take you as you are and we'll do sort of professional development sessions every once in a while, we'll bring up the speed. We don't have to do that. If we can diversify our higher ed space and bring more Black and brown brothers into the teaching space, we could prepare our folks to be ready on day one to teach in spaces that allow for our students to be authentic and also to meet them where they are and have to deal with a lot of the issues that have to be sort of, addressed once they get into the classroom because they've been sort of have issues at higher ed and what's taught and those things. So I think there's power there.
I agree with you 100%. And I think the same benefits that we talk about that exist in K-12 for Black students having a Black teacher, those same, if not a little bit more powerful for white students, exist in the higher ed. Because if you look at schools of education all around the world, right, they're mostly populated by white students, right, white female students who have probably never even had contact or had a Black teacher through their whole experience. So at least at the university level, right, they're going to see or have a Black professor if we diversify that population. And like you already hinted on, giving a whole entire different perspective and not having to wait till you get to your actual job to get this training on diversity and inclusion or cultural competency. So having that be a real experience in the School of Education is super, super important. What would you say are some of the challenges that Black men are facing with breaking into the education profession? We already talked about some of the social challenges of not being their authentic selves. Are there some others that you see or Black men have quoted or said to you?
Well, a couple things. Let me say, there's an old saying, not old saying. Dr. King once said, as we were talking, I was going through the civil rights movement and these conversations around integration. And he said, you know what, just where America is going, I'm fearful that we're integrating into a burning building. Meaning we want to be accepted by a community that in and of itself is not healthy in a lot of ways. And so when I think about particularly Black male educated and us really wanting to say we want to increase and we want to recruit, I am concerned that a lot of the spaces that we're recruiting into are not ready for our brothers. And this gets to this piece I mentioned before because of all the stereotypes and the lack of imagination. And so if we're not creating these spaces, not after they get there, but before they get there, we're going to lose again more than we bring in. And so we have to sort of say who's going ahead of us and making a space for us and making a way for us so that when we land, that there is support, there is affirmation, there is community. And that is an issue I think we already have now, because those who us have gone and have told our stories about when we walked in the first year or two, really trying to sort of, again, define who we are and having to do it year after year after year to the point where so many end up leaving, that is incredible. That's an issue. I mean, if you want to sort of get into pipeline issues, I mean, if you're talking about particularly, again, the images and the ideas of what it means to be an educator, we have to, again, understand what that means. If I remember my own experiences, and I had some positive experiences and I had some negative experiences. And I wasn't someone who went directly into education or decided in college I wanted to be an educator. because of, again, first how the profession was viewed in society, my own personal experience, and the like. And so it also has to be a societal village level elevation of the profession. And again, through Real Men Teach and again our continued positive imagery through our Real Men Teach 100 campaign is saying we're going to put the teaching profession in your face every single day. And when we talk about normalize it, like, wow, this guy Curtis is posting about another Black or brown educator who's killing it. Oh man, all right, Kurt, we get it, bro. Just stop. Like, no. This is what normalize means. Normalize means it becomes so normal that it's not a holiday to see, a Black or brown male educator doing amazing. So that when you go in to the classroom, you give that person the same level of respect you give your doctor or your lawyer or your accountant or your CEO, because we've elevated the profession. And we've said, no, this profession takes skill, takes time. That's something you just sort of fall into, but deserve the respect because of everything it takes to become this, but also what it gives to society and what it gives to our students and a path it lays for every other profession. And so again, that's societal sort of acceptance and elevation of the profession, but also this going ahead and ensuring that when we're placing our young people, particularly our young men of color, in schools, that environment is an enabling environment for them to be real, for them to get their manhood, and also for them to be their authentic selves as they are teaching, and teach in a way that allows them to bring that subject matter to the students and meet the students where they are.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that in terms of recruitment and retention, and how recruitment and retention go hand in hand. And we can recruit all the young brothers in the world, but if we put them somewhere where they don't feel welcome, they don't feel supported, they don't feel like they're going to be developed, we know they'll leave the profession within 2 years. The statistics say 2 to 3 years they will be gone. They will have left. So we started to have this idea about preparing leaders to be able to lead and support and mentor young Black men that are coming into the profession, because we're going to continue to have the leaky pipeline, right? We're going to have all this healthy recruitment of getting people excited to be in the field. And then once they get in the field, they're like, hold up, this is not what y'all told me it was about to be. I didn't know I would have these extra hurdles and these extra struggles to have to endure in order just to teach some Black children. So,
and so through our campaign, so this week or so ago, we did a Women for Real Men Teach campaign, and there were Latina, we had white, we had Black women, because we said, well, you know what? If the majority of the school principals and school leaders in the country are women, some white, some Latina, some Black, and they're not down with the campaign, and and they're having the power to make the decisions. And Curtis, you on one side of the, with your Reinventing America Schools project, saying give the power to the principal to make a decision, and the principal doesn't believe in these 3 words, and the principal doesn't believe in the power of diversity, then we spin in our heads. And so we're saying we have to elevate not only our class brothers who are going into the teaching, we have to elevate school leaders in our campaign. We have to have them buy in and declare it and declare to the world what they stand for. We have to have women, white women, Latina, Asian, Black, all women saying, Curtis, and I got to ask all, hey, Curtis, I ask all the time, Curtis, well, I'm a woman, can I wear a Real Men Teach shirt? Yes. I said, let me ask you a question. Can a Black man wear a Black girl's rock shirt? Absolutely. Yes. My daughter, I wear it for everyone in my, because I believe it. You can wear this too, because you are also declaring and saying, I stand with this, even though I am not a man. I'm someone who stands, even though I'm not a man of color. We have some of our white male allies who said, Kurt, man, I'm a white male school leader, but I want more diversity too. Can I wear a shirt? Please do. Please tell your Black and brown male educators in your building, fellas, I see you. I'm here to push this campaign, because I understand the power of it. And to my student, and to your Black and brown students, you go to them and say, hey, I'm wearing this for you, because I understand, I know the power that it has for you to see people who look like you, even though I'm not one. I have to make the decision as well. And that is how you become part of our campaign. We have people who we're highlighting, but we also have allies as well.
Creating a village, creating a coalition to support these Black men to get into the teacher pipeline. I mean, I love it. I love it because you need that. You need a coalition. We need the village, right? We need the village to help young Black men understand that teaching is revolutionary, and that real men
Yeah.
teach without a doubt. So some
And
folks might be watching this and thinking to themselves, like, wow, this is powerful. This is great. But what does an equitable teaching environment look like for Black teachers? Like, how do I create an equitable teaching environment in my school if I have Black men there or I'm looking to recruit them?
well, I mean, again, let's define the term correctly. Equity and equality are two different things,
Yep.
right? Equity says I'm going to target certain resources in the space where they're most needed. And so to me it's about percentages. If you have 80% of your students in your school building are students of color, or particularly Black, Black Latino male educated students, we need to ensure that there's equity in the number of teachers who look like them and have a similar experience. We want to target and give those who need the most the most. And that means people who understand their background, understand how to communicate, know how to de-escalate, know how to bring who they are into the curriculum, how to bring their community and who they are into the work, so that they see themselves in the work that they're doing, and it's not a foreign concept. And so this
Mm-hmm.
idea of really being targeted, that's something that school leaders should do. But more importantly, my school board colleagues and other leaders around the country who are saying, I really care about educational equity. What is your policy on education as it relates to human resource development and ensuring that those students who need the most are getting the most? And how are you ensuring that you are empowering the school leaders to have the decision making process to again resource, highlight, train, and put those folks in the classrooms that they in front of the students who need the most work? And so to me it's about policy, it's about implementation, and it's about giving those school leaders the power to make those decisions at the local level.
Definitely. I think that definitely feeds into creating equitable environments for students and for teachers. Um, so we are going to go into our Think a Black Teacher segment. We're going to roll into that right now. So, Kurt, I want to give you the floor, just because we're looking at you and the amazing work you're doing, and you're so powerful. But I'm pretty sure that you have had plenty of influences in your life. So I'd like to give you the floor and opportunity to thank a Black teacher right now that has been a powerful inspiration to you.
Well, in the spirit of real men teach, and that's redefining what teacher is, the first person I think is my father, who was my first teacher, who was, my first emulation of what it meant to be a man, a Black man, a father, a husband. And so he taught me most everything I knew. But eventually, before his death, with my mother, started in business of early child development and started early child development schools in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and really poured into the future of my community and ensuring that they had a head start through early child development. Second person is my middle school principal, Carl Wade, who even to this day is a champion of mine, who works with us in this space, who when I first started Real Men Teach, brought 15 hoodies and handed them out to all educators in his field. He's someone at a very young age who showed me this is what it means to be a Black male educator, but a leader, being that school principal, walking around, getting the respect of the community, of parents. I wanted to be that. And lastly, my professor from graduate school, Charles Ogletree, who's someone who is a historic figure from Harvard Law School. He taught me really the idea of the power of race and justice, and more importantly, our obligation to the world and to our students. And more importantly, you know what he did? He gave me his cell phone. And he said, Kurt, if you ever get pulled over by a cop, you call me. This is someone who taught President Obama, who when Henry Louis Gates got arrested, was someone who called. He has taught so many amazing men from Harvard Law School, but he gave all of his students his cell phone. And that was a power. That was the power of saying, I can be your educator, but when you leave this space, there's a world out there that I'm trying to prepare you for, but also to protect you from it. And so that protection he gave his students to this day is someone who I really appreciate. So it's Charles Ogletree, it's Carl Wade, and it's my late father, Curtis Valentine.
I think that's amazing. And the fact that those are three Black men in your lives who have been a positive influence on you. So I encourage other Black male educators out there to be that light in a brother and a sister's life. Be that. And always, my folks watching, it's that time for you to put in the chat hashtag think a Black teacher. So think a Black teacher. If they're on Facebook, tag them. If they're not, but just put their names in the chat. Think a Black teacher. We don't give folks their roses, their praises, or any of that enough. And a lot of times I just think that as Black teachers or folks teaching in a profession, you don't understand or realize the impact that you are really making on a person's life. I'm pretty sure that folks' names get called out all the time. And like, me, I did that. Like, I was just being me. Like, I was just doing what I do, teaching how I teach. And, sometimes you're in it so much and you're in the thick of it, it could just really seem like a job, right? The monotony of it, but knowing the influence and the impact that you're making on someone's life, I think that's also a major retention point. It makes people want to go back and be in a profession when they know that they are truly making a difference. So if you are out there, even if you think this person last week, thank them again. Hashtag think a Black teacher and write that person's name that you're thinking. Also, I also encourage folks, the teacher doesn't have to be your teacher. A lot of us watching and participating in this show are in education and have colleagues who we feel like are amazing and don't get their praise and don't get their just due. So if you know somebody out there doing their thing as a teacher and really making an impact in students' lives, making an impact in the community, make sure that you are thanking them. We need folks out here. We need more Black teachers out here in the field. Kurt, one last thing I really want to hone in on, because I think that this is super important as well to talk about. And it has a lot to do with you being on the school board. And the reason why that's important for me to highlight before we leave off here, because you are a parent. And a lot of time parents don't have a seat at the table to make decisions at districts that the children in their community go to. Can you discuss a little bit how you're able to influence policy and strategy to increase the numbers within that district?
Well, in addition to being the only member of the school board who taught my district at the time, when I joined the school board, I was the only person who had a child in the school system as well. I was the only parent in the system at the time. And that was an issue for folks in the community. And I was really a target for folks saying, we need someone on the school board who's a parent, who understands it. And so my children are still in the system. I mean, my children are 13 and 11. I started on the school board when they were 3 and 5. And so, when they come home from school, when we're having dinner, we are talking about the very policies that I'm, voting on and very issues I'm funding. And they're, really showing me, Dad, you thought this was what it's going to be when you envisioned it and when you voted for it and when they show you the data and they brought in some model. Here's what it looks like on the ground. At the same time, my wife is a principal. And so when it comes to policy, it's coming from the policymaker, the superintendent, to all those who carry it out, to the school leader, and to the students. And so oftentimes there's disconnects from policy to practice and throughout the pipeline and throughout the system. And so to have someone like a wife who's able to talk to me and really explain to me where policy and practice intersect and where they dissect, and having students to be able to respond back to me on a daily basis. My children are telling me, Dad, I like the school lunches. Who'd you all sign a contract with? Or Dad, how come we don't have this in our building? And I'm like, okay, let me think about that. Is your experience the same as everyone else in the system? We got 135,000 students. If you are feeling this, what about the other 134,000? And so this is important. Having parents on the school board, are people going to give you an immediate reaction to what policy looks like on the ground? And so this is incredibly important. I take it very seriously that when I'm talking with parents, and when I started something called the Fatherhood Forum, which is really increasing fatherhood engagement, this is something that I wanted to target because I understood that fathers didn't have as much voice as I thought they should. This parent engagement, particularly fathers, is incredibly important.
So we appreciate, again, I think that is super important to highlight that because, CEO of Room and Teach, college professor, but first and foremost, at the heart of this, you are a parent, you are a dad, you're a family man. So to be in spaces where you can have influence in the type of education that your children are getting and be a decision maker in that. So all our folks out there listening, that's super important because policymakers are the ones that make change in tons of places. So Curtis, we are about to wrap up. So I just want to give you the floor real quick to say some final words to our folks watching out there.
No, thank you so much for highlighting me. Thank you, Shannon, for all you do. Thank you to Sharif and the center. I'll end like this. You never know what impact you'll have on people when you start something, and so the responses we get on a daily basis for Real Men Teach are so powerful. And one in particular, I was talking with a brother, and he said, "Curtis, man, I'm just so glad we met." He said, "Finding out what you do and Real Men Teach. You know what? I think I found my tribe."
Mm.
I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Man, because I've been doing this work for years, kind of on my own. But when I find others who are doing similar work and they connect with you, it's like I've been searching through the wilderness for this connection. And so I'm glad to connect." And so there are thousands of men and women, others who are standing for this very statement of diversity, particularly of male educators of color, and are looking for connection and are looking to join the community. So join the Real Men Teach community, join our tribe. Come connect with us at realmenteach.com. You don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to, be that one person in your school, your district doing this work. Connect with us for this national movement, because Real Men Teach and the center and others are connecting on this community and this tribe of folks really pushing this. And so again, go to realmenteach.com, purchase some of our apparel. Proceeds go to our scholarship to make sure that Black male educators, Latino male educators can stay in the classrooms with scholarships, but also support our Real Men Teach 100 campaigns. Like, share. Let's normalize excellence and what it means to be an authentic, a real man in a teaching profession. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you again. Much appreciated. We appreciate you coming on the show and spreading the word about Real Men Teach and what it means to be your authentic self in the classroom. As always, our folks out there watching, my co-conspirators, we thank you for coming back every week and watching Building the Black Educator Pipeline. We'll see you next Thursday right here, same time, 12 noon. Have a great weekend.